Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our next live stream. I'll be your producer for this session. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer live. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our speakers for today. Thank you for joining.
Welcome, everyone. This is Microsoft IQ Live, and we're in the very first episode of this series. I'm Ayça Baş, a cloud developer advocate, and today I'm joined by Marco. Hi, Marco.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm Marco Castellano, VP Products of Core AI at Microsoft.
Awesome. So today we have a really exciting topic. We are diving into the Microsoft IQ stack, and we are going to talk about architecting context-aware agents with Microsoft IQ. And we will talk about all bits and pieces of how we work with 4 IQs inside the Autopilots. And if you're new to the Autopilot concept, we will also briefly talk about what Agent 365 Autopilots are, and we will basically brief you anything and everything with the demo. So we will have really less slides and more hands-on demos throughout this session. So, okay, let's switch the slides and see the problem, why we have 4 IQs in the first place. So I think the problem is really clear when we don't have any context given to the agent. Agent is really hesitant to talk about it, just like human. When we don't have any information about, let's say, a museum we go to, we cannot talk about anything we see over there. We need a bit of context. So agent is, again, as good as the context it can reach. So across that, if we don't give any context to the agent, then it will try to fill up information. Maybe there will be some hallucinations, and we will never know if data is correct or not. And also, agent will never know the access levels and the permissions across the documents and everything. And because of that reason, today we are talking about the Microsoft IQ, one IQ stack. Marco, if you can switch to the next slide. Yeah, so 4 IQ concepts, each are bringing something different into our agent architecture. Work IQ is responsible of bringing the workspace context, chats, emails, messages, all of the Microsoft 365 tools we are using. We can actually utilize that data in our agent architecture. And then Foundry IQ, we can build knowledge bases that are specialized around our policies, documents, and all of the structured and unstructured data can live behind the Microsoft Foundry IQ space as well. And Fabric IQ is the space where we can bring the knowledge, basically all of the operational information from, let's say, the system records, entities, all of the business that is operating, and all of the information we are keeping behind the scenes. We can connect all of that to our agent through Fabric IQ. And finally, the Web IQ, which is very much needed for pretty much all of the agents, is something that can offer more than just doing web grounding. And we will talk about it briefly too. It brings all of the information from outside of our organization. And yeah, with that, I think let's get started with Web IQ first, and then we will jump into the cool demo. Marco will introduce us after this. So a brief introduction to Web IQ. Web IQ grounds your agent information outside of your organization. And it's not only browsing data, we can bring news, images, videos, web. So all of these information can be brought through Web IQ. So what we're offering here is very different than the web grounding. The quality is definitely different compared to the normal web grounding, and also the speed, because Web IQ is designed for multi-agent architecture. The speed and the information we're grounding behind the scene can definitely make the difference if you're using multi-IQ structure. And also the token efficiency is definitely lower compared to any other web service you're using. And with that, okay, let's get started with the demo and then see the Web IQ portion of it first.
All right, so I'm going to start with Web IQ, and I'm going to use this raw, and I'm using it raw for a good reason. Now, in a minute, certainly, we're going to go into the Foundry service and all the crazy stuff in there. I'm using Web IQ raw just so you can see how fast it is. Now, I did put Aisha's name in here. We're going to search on you, Aisha. So let's see what we get.
Let's try.
But the reason I'm using this raw is exactly this. Before I could even get the words out of my mouth, the results come back. Usually if I had couched this in an agent, then other stuff would have happened and we would have been waiting for it. But when I use it raw like this, and this is the playground that, if you have access to this, and right now it's still unlimited access, but you can find it at webiq.microsoft.ai. In this case, I'm using the playground. So when you use the playground like this, boy, you really see how fast this thing is. It is ridiculous how fast this comes back. I mean, almost always sub-second that we get here. And so, it's got me all of this information about Aisha, about her LinkedIn. And I think I saw these other things, but all this stuff came back super quickly. Now, there are, as Aisha mentioned, there are a number of different endpoints, that you can use here. And I guess my Zoom and this don't want to play nicely with each other. So, there's the web endpoint, but there are also videos, browse, news, images and stuff like that. There is some stuff in beta, finance, places, and I don't really know what Sonic is. I've been meaning to figure that out. I assume maybe it's searching sounds or something. I honestly don't know what that is. I've been meaning to. Let's see what happens if I try. I'm going to try this actually. I'm just I've never done this before.
Again, searching me and Sonic.
I'm going to search you. Many songs have been written about Aisha Bosch.
About me.
Nah, I gave you the same stuff.
The results are in Turkish mostly, by the way.
They are. Well, in Turkish. Well, you are Turkish, so I think that's reasonable. But in any case, okay, well, Sonic in this case didn't give me any songs about you. I don't really know what that does. But regardless, the point remains that, and if I had done a video search, on the other hand, I'm sure, there are reams of videos of you on YouTube, as you are, in fact, a developer advocate. You do this stuff all the time. Anyway, so my point about Web IQ and your point about Web IQ is exactly that. This is a way that you can ground your agents to the real world in a very fast and headless way. This is not Bing, by the way. This is actually a newer indexing strategy than Bing, and it's specifically made to work with agents. It's made to have no face. It's made to be super quick. So that is the quick version of Web IQ.
Awesome. So I'll be quick on talking about the rest of the IQs, but the next one I'm going to talk about is Foundry IQ, which is a very popular one. Foundry IQ is the knowledge retrieval for our agentic system. So it is powered by Azure AI Search, which was out there for a real long time, providing all of the retrieval augmented generation services for our applications. Now, Foundry IQ is designed for our agentic retrieval, where not only you can bring indexes directly to your agent, but if you use Foundry IQ, you can actually design knowledge bases which already has context about your data behind the scene. So with Foundry IQ, it's not only the indexes coming through Azure AI Search to Foundry IQ, you can also create, let's say, connect your structured and unstructured data to Foundry IQ, such as OneLake, SharePoint. You can connect web, you can connect a custom MCP, and also you can connect the Work IQ, Fabric IQ. You can bring all of the IQs into your knowledge base if you want to build one single unified knowledge base and then manage all of your knowledge across the board through a single knowledge base. And this is something that really looks like you're designing a mini agent, because you can bring a model in and you can basically define which knowledge sources for which information, and again, you can define the knowledge base's purposes and manage all of that data layer in a different space. So Foundry IQ is a really amazing service when it comes to agentic knowledge retrieval. And next, I'm going to talk about Fabric IQ briefly, which is also amazing, one of the amazing IQ services. And here you can pretty much share your business's language with your agent. So it is nothing like Foundry IQ is providing. Fabric IQ is there for all of your business knowledge. So you can have your organizational roles, entities, all of the rules, let's say all of the information about your customers, let's say account information, shipment information, or basically all of the things that makes your business a purpose basically is the language of your business. And then you can build ontologies on top of that and share that data through Fabric IQ. So it's grounded on top of OneLake, and here you can build and again design your data agent according to your needs, and you need to give all of that, let's say, business language to your data agent so that it will be able to understand what we mean when we use, let's say, 3-letter acronyms and all of those crazy 3-letter things we use, again, also inside Microsoft, so that your agent is aware what we're really talking about. And with that, those two cool IQs, Marco is going to show you how we can use both of them inside our agent.
All right, here we go. So now we're getting into the real meat of this presentation. Now, first of all, I'm going to start with the fact that in Foundry, there are two types of agents. Now, there are hosted agents and there are prompt agents. So for those of you who have been using the Foundry agent service for a little while, you might be accustomed to these kinds of prompt agents, where prompt agents, I mean, the instructions are all right here. The tools are declared right here. This is a different prompt agent than the one I'm going to show in a moment. But basically, prompt agents are for relatively simple use cases where everything can be specified declaratively. But now we have the notion of hosted agents. And this is going to be my hotel servicing agent. And this is indeed a hosted agent. So this is using the new capability of the Foundry agent service. This just went GA a week ago, I think, or maybe a week and a half ago. But this basically allows me to use any orchestration engine. So you can have a much more complex agent orchestration. You can have multiple agents inside of here and that kind of thing. But that's what I'm using here. I'm using a hosted agent because, as you're going to see in a moment, this hotel servicing agent does a lot. And the way it's doing a lot is it is using all of the things. It's using Foundry IQ, Fabric IQ, and as you're going to see in a little while later, Work IQ in a big way. Now, I'm going to ask this again. Actually, now I'm going to leave this on the screen, but I'm going to ask it again. And this is going to spin up over here. If it lets me, come on. Let's fire this guy up and ask about Maria Garcia's current reservations. And it's going to take a little while. It's going to take about, 45 seconds or so because, well, the truth is, although this is a demo instance, I have loaded this thing up with 75,000 reservations, 15 hotel properties. I have all this stuff in here, and it is going
on the data seeding.
Yeah, and you can actually see it zipping along on the right-hand side here, querying all of the things. So right now it's querying Fabric, and it's using Fabric IQ to query Fabric. And if I had asked it to do something, it's going to call Foundry IQ. So I have this connected to, first of all, Foundry IQ. So let's look at the Foundry IQ while we're waiting for it to come back. Let's look at the Foundry IQ that I have here. Now, what is Foundry IQ? Now, you mentioned, Aicha, that this is agentic search. Well, what does that mean? Now, I have these search indices, and they don't have to be search indices. I mean, if I look at the sources of this stuff, there's all kinds of sources that I can add to this thing, to Foundry IQ, including arbitrary MCP sources. But Foundry IQ in general is meant to be a knowledge store, but a kind of an agentic knowledge store. So in this case, I've connected it to 4 different search indices. I have my properties, I have my policies, I have the dining, like the menus and all this stuff. And yes, there are real like menus in here, or not real fake menus in here. And I have my operations. I made this as much as I could to approximate a real hotel chain and what their data would be. And so now if you look at this thing, this is not just your average knowledge base. It's not just straight up searching this stuff. There is a model here, and there's a reasoning effort here. There are also these instructions here. Why is that? Because Foundry IQ is actually a separate agent. And this is something that you'll find really about all of the IQs, is that in reality, each one of these things is actually a sub-agent. They are a separate agent. And as a separate agent, they have one job. And this guy, Foundry IQ, its one job is to search across all of these sources according to its input query and to find whatever it is that the agent who called it is asking for. And so it's applying this agentic reasoning, but that means that it may also go back and forth. It might try one source, not get what it's looking for, try another source. So it can be recurrent, that it can go back and forth into the various knowledge sources. Part of the reason why we do this is the notion of reuse. I mean, if I open up, let's see, if I open up Foundry control plane over here, let me, I didn't have that open before, but let's load this guy up. Now, Foundry control plane, this is kind of going to be, when this loads, I hope it loads, the front door of Foundry control plane. Let me reload that because maybe it doesn't want to play with me right now. Here it comes. I have a lot of agents running. In a moment, this is going to start tabulating all the agents that I have running. Me and Aisha both actually are using this instance, and we're cracking away making agents in here. We have a bunch of agents running in here. And in many cases, we want to reuse the same documents, the same grounding sources. Now, in this case, I have 4, but what if I had 50? Like in any real environment, you're going to have a whole bunch of these things. And those could be search indexes, blob stores, Elasticsearch. It could be all kinds of stuff that are spread all across your business. Now, what you don't want to do necessarily is define this again and again on every single agent that you build. That is not what you want, because these things, each one of these data sources requires some context about what the data source is, what it contains, and all that kind of stuff. And so you'll be cluttering this guy up with tools and with context. Or what I'm doing here really, or what I also did earlier in the prompt agent, I connected to a single Foundry IQ source. And with that, I get all of these different knowledge sources all at the same time. So this way, with just that single tool call, or what looks like a single tool call from the perspective of the calling agent, I am connected to multiple different data sources. So that's what this is all about. That's what Foundry IQ is all about. So it's about reuse, and it's also about what I call context delegation. Now we do see that our query has come back here, and we found Maria Garcia has 6 current and upcoming reservations on file. And here they are at our various Lyrenza hotels around the world. She's a world traveler, I guess. Now, to get this stuff, well, actually, this particular query that I made was very Fabric intensive, because this data is all stored in Fabric. And this is a great place to show what Fabric IQ is all about, because, I mean, we as humans, well, this is how we deal with data. So here I am, if I'm the hotel, operator, I might go to this report, this Power BI report, and we have millions, probably billions of Power BI reports in operation right now. This is how we as humans work with data, but this is not so good for agents. This is not really how agents function. So not great for agents. Now, behind these reports, behind these Power BI reports are these things. Let's see if I can zoom this thing out. I don't know that I can. This is a semantic model. And this semantic model, so, my properties are in here, and my bookings are in here, and my maintenance are in here. I have all this stuff about my hotels in this database that underlies this thing. And on top of this database is this semantic model. And this semantic model defines things like the relationships between tables. And so here in my semantic model, it shows indeed that properties are linked to requests. And here also I have these kinds of derived things, like the number of confirmed requests, fulfilled requests, these kinds of sums and products and things that I'm calculating over here. Now, there is one thing that I did wrong when I made this semantic model, by the way, or really when I made the underlying database, which is that when you look at this with your eyes, you can read it. And that's no real semantic model anywhere is like this, especially if you're using data from some old school system like some Oracle or SAP, where they limited table and column names to 8 characters. And so everything in here looks like Q_RSTR. But it's for that reason that a semantic model by itself is insufficient for AI. So when you have an agent, you're connecting it to your data, you kind of can connect it to a semantic model, but that doesn't really tell it enough. I mean, that tells it the relationships between the tables, but it doesn't, under most circumstances, doesn't really tell it what those tables are, what they contain, what the meaning of those things are to your business, which is why there is this button here, which is generate an ontology. So I did generate an ontology from this semantic model, and this is what it looks like, or at least this is part of it. I mean, you can see there's entities over here for all manner of things. And if I zoom in here a little bit, now the ontology is a little bit different. An ontology is a metadata layer on top of your data. And this is, one piece of my ontology anyway. And in this piece, this is the reservation. Now, most of the time, these boxes in the ontology, they map to tables in the underlying system. That's true. But what these boxes really are, they're not tables. They are business entities. They are things that have a meaning to your business. So in my business, I have guests and I have reservations and I have maintenance requests and I have whatever else they might be that happens in a hotel. And so that's what these things represent. And when you open these things up, which I'm not going to do because it's not letting me do it. Okay, here we go. When I open these things up, I can look at this thing and I can see that in here, I can have about this. I can have descriptions about it. What is it? What is this thing? It's a reservation for a room. What are some synonyms about it? Well, you might call a reservation a booking. You might call it a stay. There's various different things that you might call this thing. But back to where we were, if this thing lets me get back to it. There we go. Now, these linkages between this stuff, so between a reservation and a special request, between a reservation and a guest, these linkages are not exactly table linkages in an ontology. They are verbs. And so a guest books a reservation. A reservation results in a stay. As a hotel, I hope that you actually do show up for your reservation. A reservation has a special request. And so this ontology can describe to the agent what this data actually is, what it means to my business, and the relationships between this data, not just at the table level, but at the business level. So I could connect my agent directly to an ontology. If I have an ontology, and an ontology generally covers a single data source. When I do that, the ontology itself is an MCP server. And so I can connect my agent directly to the ontology as an MCP server, and the MCP server will use the ontology to write the queries. So it's it's NL to ontology is what it's actually called, natural language to ontology. You give it natural language, it uses the ontology, it writes the query, it runs the query and gives it back to the agent. You can do it that way, but that's not what I did here. That is not the thing that I connected my agent to. And of course, my demo failed here for some reason, but I will fix it anyway. Okay, now I'm in a weird space here because where's my little sidebar? Okay, let me just open this agent again. Come on, agent, come on back. Wake up. There we go. All right. So what I actually did, and I think the problem is I didn't give it all of the tables. That's the mistake I made. Okay, anyway, what I actually connected my downstream agent to is this. So you can connect it to an ontology. However, that's just one data source. Now, in this case, I actually have multiple different data sources over here. Well, I got the semantic model, but I also have two different lake houses here. And in any real business, this is going to be the case, right? You're going to have multiple different places where data is stored, especially if you've grown by acquisition or anything like that. In this case, I have two. I have my guest services lake house, but then separately somewhere else, I have my hotel operations lake house. So I want to connect my agent to multiple different and disparate data sources. And I can do that with the Fabric data agent, which is also part of Fabric IQ. Now, this Fabric data agent, it's not just that it's connecting it to these different data sources. If we actually look at what's in here, now each one of these data sources will have a description. It'll have generally some instructions. The instructions often have like a data dictionary in it. Well, that's the ontology, so that's relatively simplistic and stuff like that. So it'll have all this stuff in it. And then we'll have these kinds of agent instructions. So there's one thing to for each data source, it'll tell it what each data source is, what it contains, and that sort of thing. The ontology is a little bit self-describing. We'll have example queries in here as well. But then the agent instructions will tell it, moreover, kind of like, when should it use what? So now you got all these data sources. What should it use this lakehouse for? What should it use that lakehouse for? What should it use the semantic model for? And that kind of thing. And generally, too, we'll have this stuff. Let's say mice. I didn't even know this until I started doing these things with some hotel chains. These kinds of acronyms that people and other agents might use in interacting with this data. So MICE, I guess, stands for meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. And this is apparently, I guess, a relatively common acronym in the hotel industry. I had never heard it before. But my point is, if you don't tell this to the agent and you start asking about mice, it might think that one of your hotels is infested. But no, actually what we mean is these are meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. And so your agent instructions are a place where you can give it the kind of terminology that you are going to be using in your business and the way that people are going to be interacting with this data. And that's pretty important. That's an important step to making all of this stuff work. And once again, I mean, if taken together, like if you look at all this stuff, I got the instructions, I got data source instructions for each one of these things, I got example queries, and that's a lot of context. That's a bunch of stuff. And so once again, what I don't want to do is load this into my agent. I mean, if I ask something of this agent that doesn't need it to go look up the data for some reason, then I don't need to load up all this context. That's a lot of tokens that it doesn't necessarily need. So the idea is that when it needs data, when it needs to access the data from any of these sources, it phones a friend. It phones this hotel operations agent. This hotel operations agent contains all the context, all the data source linkages that it needs to be able to get this data. And it can do this very effectively because it's all packaged together in one place, which is the Fabric data agent. And these are the various components of Fabric IQ. Now back to you, Acha.
Thanks, Marco. Okay, so let's jump into the last two concepts I want to talk in the slides, and we can really dive into the agent we're building. Okay, so the next topic is Work IQ, and Work IQ, as you all know, is one of the most used IQs as well. It helps us reach the Microsoft 365 data behind the scenes, all of the workspace information, chats, emails, let's say our org charts, etc. All of that can be reached through Microsoft Work IQ. And the reason why we come up with Work IQ, because one of the most common questions we get from developers is Work IQ the replacement of Microsoft Graph? And the simple answer is no. Microsoft Graph is still there. It's an API set where we still use, but the Work IQ is specifically built for agentic consumption. Instead of throwing the maybe 200, 300, I don't remember the numbers, but Microsoft Graph has more than 200 endpoints. Instead of throwing all of that information to an agent, what Work IQ does behind the scene is actually providing 10 dynamic tools to an agent. And whenever agent needs to reach out any Microsoft 365 information, it goes and plans out how to use Microsoft 365 data. It first comes up with a schema and list of APIs it can utilize, and then it uses, let's say, fetch tool to retrieve all of that information. And after that, if it needs to do any action, it uses do action tool again. And there are a bunch of other really cool tools. For example, there's an ask tool, which you can directly go and ask a question. If you use the ask tool, ask question to M365 Copilot. So all of those dynamic tools are built for agentic consumption. If your architecture requires M365 data, and if you build a agentic architecture, then you would need Work IQ. And this is definitely the optimized version of Microsoft 365 dataset, where you can bring this dataset using 3 different endpoints. You can either use Work IQ REST APIs, you can use A2A, or you can use MCP. And in this demo, I think Marco is using the MCP version. But in addition to all that, you can also bring Work IQ as a part of the Foundry IQ too. If you don't want to, let's say, do any actions, take any actions with your agent, you can just use Work IQ as a data source. So you can use M365 data as a single data source. And on top of all of these IQ goodness, there's one extra topic we want to tap into today, which is the autopilot concept. This is it's getting more and more popular. We are getting a lot of questions about this, and Agent 365 Autopilot works really well and natively with all of the IQs as well. That's why we wanted to cover this as a part of our slide deck. But also on top of all that, Marco's demo also includes autopilots, which is also another benefit to it. So what is Agent 365 Autopilot in the first place, and how are they really different than any other agent? First of all, when you build an agent, let's say you want to use that agent on Teams, when you actually publish that agent to Teams, and in fact, there's a button on Foundry, you can publish to Teams. What you actually do behind the scenes is actually wrapping your agent to a bot service and then publishing an app on Teams platform. But in Agent 365, which is a really new service, what we're providing here is, instead of bringing agents as apps, why not bringing agents into our tenants as their own identity? So basically recruiting an agent into a tenant, which, let's say, agent can report to Marco, agent can also have its own mailbox, its own calendar, Teams presence, it can join in meetings, it can take notes, it can send emails on behalf of itself, not on behalf of you. So that changes a lot of dynamics in the entire tenant, because in that case, agent can have its own space, its own collaborations, and you can even see who agents is working the most in the entire tenant, etc. So when you create hosted agents, it already comes with a Agent 365 blueprint. And when I say blueprint, I'm talking about the identity ID. And you can, just like how you collaborate with any other colleague, you can mention the Autopilot, you can collaborate with it. When you ask that Autopilot to send an email, it will use its own email address to send the email and take all of the actions on behalf of itself. And on top of all that, it works pretty natively, as I mentioned earlier, with Microsoft IQ stack. So when you bring IQs into the Autopilot, then it really has all of the capabilities and knowledge that another colleague can have, because what you really build over there is not just, let's say, retrieving a policy or retrieving, let's say, a shipment information, but agent now has, if you bring Work IQ, the knowledge of, let's say, what is talked in that recent meeting, if that customer needs to be prioritized, or let's say there is some new changes in the finance, and let's say there is a new hiring freeze, etc. All of that company internal knowledge is also part of the agent. So that's why connecting Autopilots with the IQ is a really solution power dynamic. And one last slide I want to show you before we switch to Marco's Autopilot demo with 4 IQs. What we are trying to show you today is this very, very simple diagram. We have the Autopilot with its own identity. So agent we build in the Foundry, connecting to all of the IQs, is becoming an Agent 365 Autopilot, and connecting across the IQs to be able to bring all of those data set into the workspace, so that agent is capable of knowing what is in the policies in the company, what is in the company, like what do we really do in the company business, and in the same time access to the web IQ and retrieve information from the web. On top of all that, also has access to the Work IQ for all of the information that we all usually have in the work tenant. And with all that, let's see this awesome demo.
All right, folks, here we go. All right, now we're gonna get to the real stuff. So let's check this out now. Okay, so first of all, now let's talk about Work IQ. As I mentioned, my agents here, my hotel agent is indeed using Work IQ to access emails and things like that. Well, but Work IQ is actually pretty useful in lots of different ways. I mean, here you'll notice that if you're using M365 Copilot, it is using Work IQ. Look at that. And so when I ask her, do I have any emails from Maria Garcia? It finds my emails from Maria Garcia. How did it find them? Well, it was using Work IQ. Believe it or not, behind the scenes, even our own tools use Work IQ. Another way that you can use Work IQ is, well, here I am in the GitHub Copilot app. This has become my primary coding agent now. Aisha and I disagree on this. She likes the CLI. Well, I shouldn't speak for you, Aisha, but I like this app. I think this app is cool because I've never been a CLI person. But, I had to do I administer an Azure domain for a bunch of people, actually. And part of my job is I administer this Azure domain. And I got a little bit of a nastygram from our security that people had created storage resources in this Azure instance that had open authentication. That is to say, you could access them from the web. And in this case, we generally don't allow that without special approval. So I had to go through them all and find them and determine who owned them, like who created them, who owned them. Do they still work here? Do we even still need the security resource, all that stuff? And what did I use for that? Or really, what did it use for that? Work IQ right there. So I actually have connected my GitHub Copilot app to Work IQ as an MCP server. And this is super handy because what I had to do, if you look on the right-hand side, and I've kind of hidden part of it so that it doesn't show a lot of PII here, but I made it actually write emails to each one of these people, 27 of them, mind you, and said, hey, I found these storage accounts for you that have open authentication. I'm going to shut that off. Let me know if you need the special approval, like if you have something depending on this thing. And then I scheduled a task for 9 o'clock this morning, actually, to turn that all off for everybody. So you can use Work IQ even for coding tasks. And even even when I wrote that hotel demonstration that I was showing earlier, I had a problem with it that I know Aisha had solved before, and she sent it to me in a Teams message or an email or something. And I said, somewhere in there in the hotel agent, I'm like, go look at the Teams messages from Aisha. She solved this already, whatever the problem is. And it did it. It found it. It found it in my Teams. And there it was. Now, it's also used here in Scout. And so here I'm like, where's that slide deck that Aisha just sent me? What did it do? It totally used Work IQ to find this very slide deck that we're showing here today. So if you haven't seen Microsoft Scout, we used to call it Clawpilot, but basically it's a little thing that runs and it has lots of claw-like capabilities, even though it has no code in common with OpenClaw. It uses Work IQ as well. But all of these things have one thing in common, which is that all of these things are running on behalf of me. So Work IQ has a mode where it can run on behalf of you. And so when you use Work IQ, it is logging in as you. And that means that it has all the permissions that you have, for better or worse, right? It can search my emails, it can search my Teams, but it could also delete files from OneDrive and SharePoint and things like that. Well, now this hotel agent, though, the way I have actually deployed this hotel agent, earlier we used it, where did it go? There it is. We used it like this. And in this case, it was, it was on behalf of me. So it's using my ID, but that's not how I deployed this. Actually, how this is deployed is like this. This is the real hotel guest services agent. And even looking at it this way, we're like, oh, okay, well, it's a chatbot. That's nice. No, not exactly. Because if I look at this in the org chart, you see, well, it reports to me. This thing has its own user. And that means, too, that it has its own email inbox, which means that it itself can email Maria Garcia, who canceled her reservation in Scottsdale. So this thing has its own identity. But when we say it has its own identity in the Microsoft world, we don't just mean an Entra ID. We mean, well, it has an Entra ID, certainly, but we also mean that we provisioned it a full M365 instance. So it has its own email, its own OneDrive space, all of those things. And it's using Work IQ as the portal to all of this stuff. So how did it send this email? How is it checking its Teams messages and all of these things? It's doing that using Work IQ, because what Work IQ really is, it's the headless version of all of the Microsoft apps, of Outlook and Teams, of Word and SharePoint, of even Dynamics now. That's the idea of Work IQ, the agent-facing version of this. So underneath all of this, down here, we got this agent running in Foundry, but I've defined it up here in Agent 365. And I defined it in a very special way. I defined it as an agent template. When you define something as an agent template, what that means is that now I can go, or really anybody can go in here. You could do this too. We look at built for your org, and here's one of these is the right one. I've actually made a couple of these as I noodled with it. But
I talk to your agents time to time.
Yes, you can. Well, you can make one of your own, right? So here's my hotel guest services agent, and in a moment here, this should light up. There we go. Now, basically what this means is now you can create an instance of this agent of your own. When you create this instance, then you will have your hotel guest services instance that reports to you, in fact. And so there can be more than one of these agents. Now, underneath the scenes, they all share the same Foundry agent codes. They're all going to be running in the same Foundry agent, but their context is different. They're going to be running in different user contexts. Yours will be running in your context, or your user's context, your agent's user's context. Mine will be running in my agent's user's context. But speaking of context, another cool thing about this is that these things run in their own security context. These agents, now you can define this at the template level. And so I can decide at the template level what permissions I want this agent to be able to have. Now, let's say, for example, that I did not want this agent to have read-write all to files. Now, there's another agent that I've been working on, which is more a bank agent. This is another one that I've been building right now. So this is also an agent template. And in this bank agent, now banks have, a rather stricter security requirement. So for this one, I have set it only to file read all. And so this type of user can't possibly delete a file. In fact, in this case, it can't even write a file, which is maybe a bridge too far. But I mean, this cannot possibly do it. This user just can't do it. It is banned. There's nothing that this user can do to mess with my files. So now, like I said, it's logged in as a different user than me. That does have some nuances, though. So for example, let's say that I made a video of our Lorenza Scottsdale Sonoran Resort. I made this video as me. And now I say to my hotel guest services agent here, hey, share Maria Garcia on email. Email her a link to my video that is stored in OneDrive, right? It can't do it. It can't do it unless I have previously shared it to the hotel guest services, any more than Aicha can do it. Aicha is a different user for me, and so is this. And so unless I share that file to it up front, it can't even see it. So these are some considerations you have to take into account when you make these users that are separate users, you make these agents that are separate users. Well, they are running in a different space. And so if you want them to be able to work with or manipulate files in OneDrive or SharePoint, for example, you have to explicitly share that to them. You could share folders to them or whatever like that. But regardless, you do have to take that into account. Furthermore, to make this all work, there is a cocktail of permissions. So in reality, when you do this stuff, and this bank agent I was showing you a moment ago is actually my 7th one. So I've been doing this bit by bit as this technology has matured. But this user, this hotel guest services user, and again, it is literally a user, it needs to have permissions to the underlying Azure thing. So it has to have, I think it's Foundry user permission, because it is a user. So you need to give it that RBAC role or add it to a security group in Azure that gives it that role. It needs to have permissions to the underlying fabric as well. So it is a separate user. It needs specifically to be granted these roles in Azure, in Fabric, in M365, so that it can see what it needs to see. And that's part of getting these things set up, is not just setting up the security context, but setting up the roles on the underlying resources so that this type of user can see all the things that it needs to see to do its job. So that is pretty key to making all of this work. But the fact is, back to Work IQ. Work IQ is the headless version of the Microsoft apps. It can be used on your behalf as here, or it can be used on the agent's behalf as here, on behalf of the agent's own standalone user, which, yes, at Microsoft, we have been calling them Autopilot agents, for better or worse, because it doesn't mean they're really Autopilot, right? I mean, this hotel guest services thing, I can make it such that it emails me or Teamses me for approval for something. Maria wants to change a reservation. Do you approve this? So it's not really an autopilot in that sense of the word. It's all how you set it up. But that's what we're calling it. So there it is.
There's a really related question in chat. Anton is asking, when Autopilot agent is using Work IQ, is it using its own permissions as a user agent to identify sites and resources it has access to? And what you were just explaining is that if you have a file, but agent identity doesn't have access to that file, then agent cannot do anything about it. And I actually learned this in a really interesting way. When we were building one of these autopilots for builds, I set everything up in Fabric, and everything in the Fabric IQ was working. And it was also working in Foundry, because when you log into Foundry, it's using your own credentials, so it uses your own token. And agent works in the Foundry. But when I switch to Teams agent has its own identity, it has its own blueprint, it's not working at all. And the one little thing I forgot is adding the agent in the Fabric workspace, where agent needs to be a part of that Fabric workspace so that it can access to the data through Fabric IQ, and it can work with the data. And in fact, if you go to your Fabric workspace, I'm sure this hotel agent, the hotel autopilot, is a part of that workspace. So
yes. Now, there's another question on the chat here, and I am unable to reply to the chat for some reason, for some technical reason that I can't figure out, but that's okay. I'm going to say it live. So John James Marsh, who I believe you said you're coming from Riyadh, which is cool. I'm going to be there myself in a couple of weeks for the LEAP conference. John James Marsh asks, what type of license do you need for Work IQ? And, so what type of license do you user need? You need, I think, a Copilot license. Am I right about that, Aicha?
yes, correct. You need M365 Copilot license.
But what type of license does an agent need if it's using its own identity with the Work IQ? I believe this is all it needs now. Am I right about that, Aicha?
Frontier, yes, you would need Microsoft 365 Frontier license to be able to work with Agent 365 in the first place.
Right. Now, I cannot zoom out. It won't let me zoom out. There we go. Whoa. Anyway, okay. Now, one other thing, and you remember that I was saying earlier that one of the things, and I'm gonna show you a quick gotcha over here. Now, let me see if I can find this one over here. Now, you remember, Aicha, you're the one who taught me this. Do you remember that I said earlier that there was, when I was building this hotel agent, there was some problem that you had solved that I didn't remember what it was, but I made it go look it up. I made the Copilot go look it up for me. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was a Copilot setting over here. There are these policies in Agent 365. And somewhere in here, you do have to enable, which one was it? Do you remember what it was that we had to enable in here to make this thing work? One of these policies.
I think it was Frontier. Yeah, Copilot.
Frontier. Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm just saying, like, this one got me for it was a whole night that this got me until you came online. Aicha is in a different time zone than I am. You came online and you told me straight away what the problem is. I turned it on and everything worked. So that doesn't happen to all of you. Just so you know, please turn that on. Don't mess with your own self like this. All right, let's take some other comments and questions that are in here.
Yeah, also, one other thing is that, I don't know if you remember, but figuring out if agent is sending an email or not took us a lot of time. We actually went to Exchange admin, gave us access to agent's mailbox, because we were not able to see it at all. I don't know if you have the Outlook open, but you should really need to grant yourself access to be able to see if agent is really sending email or not.
Right. So this is indeed, that's what I did here. That's what I was referring to. So I have my hotel guest services. This is the actual agent's email box. And what I did here is at the Exchange admin level, I delegated its box to me. Now, one of the challenges, by the way, of doing this in a real corporate environment, see, the thing is, I am the super admin of all of the things, and Aicha is too, right? She and I are sharing this instance, and both of us can do everything everywhere in Azure, in Fabric, in Outlook, in Exchange, and Entra. We have all the things over here. Now, most of you in a real world environment are not going to be that way, right? You're going to be the Azure administrator maybe, but not the Entra administrator. Or you're going to, whatever. You'll be able to administer part of this, but not the other part. This does require some collaboration between administrators. You're going to have to make some friends, maybe buy some boxes of chocolate or something to make this work, because everybody likes chocolate. Maybe not you, Aicha. You're not a big chocolate person, are you? I can't remember.
Yeah,
Everybody except Aicha likes chocolate, so don't buy her chocolate. But in any case, but my point is, like, there is a little bit of a collaborative effort that's going to happen here, because you may build the underpinnings of this stuff in Foundry, and you may have the data in Fabric, but you're going to need your Exchange administrator to help you out with some of this stuff, including, for example, delegating the mailbox here, because the agent really has no power to do this. The agent itself, Hotel Guest Services agent, can't delegate its own mailbox to me. There's nothing I could do to make it do that. I don't think there is anyway. So that it kind of has to be done at an admin level when this agent is created. And it is a best practice, actually, as Aisha mentions, so that you can see what it's doing.
Yeah, there is also a question in the chat. Pablo is asking, what shall we do if we want an agent, Autopilot, to be able to access all the contexts of the members of a team, except emails, perhaps? But I'm not really sure if it's something we can do with Autopilots. We cannot, like Autopilot cannot access to users' information. Like basically, it cannot act on behalf of me or you. It acts on behalf of itself.
Well, unless you share it, right? So like, I mean, here, for example, I could go here and say, go to my calendar, and I could share my calendar. Let's say I'll pick this calendar. I can share it with my hotel guest services agent, or I can share it with my bank agent here, which is called Marcos Teller, like so. Well, I have two of them. So anyway, so you can share stuff with these agents just like you would with another user. You can delegate stuff to these agents, and so I could choose how I share my calendar. Does it have the ability to literally edit events on there and make events? Does it have the ability to make events as me? So you can choose by sharing files, by sharing emails or whatever, or calendars. You can choose what you want this thing to be able to see. You and other users can choose these things, but you do have to make those choices.
Yeah, and in fact, what I would really do when you gave this advice just came to me. I would really add the agent into the Teams chat or channel, so that agent can see everything we are sharing over there. If there's a conversation happening in the Teams meeting, agent being in the chat will give the agent all the context probably. And as much as data is shared with the agent, just like another colleague, then agent will be able to access to it.
All right. Other questions? What do you see going on in the chat over here, Aisha?
There is one additional question I've seen. It's a little bit on top. Miguel was asking, basically saying that it's the first time hearing about Microsoft IQ Stack. Interested in learning more? Is there a beginner course introductory material? We actually have Microsoft IQ series where we have beginner-friendly videos and cookbooks available there. And actually, that really last slide is very relevant to this question. The IQ series is definitely the place if you want to dig deeper into individual IQs, learn about how you can use them in agents or in different concepts. And we have cookbooks, videos, and if you complete all of that, then you will be also earning the digital badge of individual IQs. We currently have Foundry IQ and Work IQ. Fabric IQ is also in the works. We will be releasing that soon. And you can also access the slides we just shared, and you can see all of the, you can reuse the slides if you want to. And also, just to give you a brief information about the series, this is the very first episode of the Microsoft IQ Live, and we really wanted to start this series, bi-weekly series, because we really wanted to have a space to talk about what is new with the IQs and dive deeper into individual IQs and different multi-IQ concepts. So if you continue watching the IQ Live series, you will be learning more in every episode. Go ahead and check out academy.com/Microsoft IQ Live link. You will see all of the scheduled sessions in the agenda. We have, starting from today until Microsoft Ignite, we have bi-weekly sessions scheduled, and each one of them is covering something that we basically slightly tap into today, but going deeper in every concept in every possible way. And for example, the next session is going to be about Foundry IQ serverless, which we didn't get a chance to talk about today, but it's also a very cool service we just released at Build, and I'm sure you will also get a lot of information about it in this session happening in 2 weeks. Another really cool session is Web IQ. We will dive deeper into the Web IQ with the product team being here and showing you all of the goodness that can come from the Web IQ, so on and so forth. Yeah, so Marco, which session are you most excited about in the IQ Live?
Well, you know, I mean, I'm a big fan of Fabric IQ, actually. I mean, and in part because of how kind of chunky it is. Well, you know, I mean, I love my work IQ and I use it every day. But I mean, I think that Fabric IQ has a lot of aspects to it that are hard to replicate in other ways or with other companies. And so that, I would say, is one that I would be more excited about than some of the others.
Yeah, I guess. And there's one question, and I'm going to direct it to you. Are Fabric IQ and Foundry IQ can work together? If yes, then how can we do it? Any document reference?
Okay, so Foundry IQ and Fabric IQ can work together, actually. And there's a couple of different ways that you can go about that. You actually can connect Foundry IQ directly to Fabric IQ if you want to, or you could just have them side by side. And that's what I did in my case. In the case of this agent that we were looking at today, and really most of the agents that I built, I have them side by side. And there are reasons why you might want to do both, basically. If you might need an agent to be the arbiter between different sources of information, one of which is Fabric IQ, and there are others that, other structured data stores that you might want it to sort of arbitrate between, then you might want to do the connection via Foundry IQ. It seems to me that under most circumstances, these things will be more like side by side, that you won't call Fabric IQ from Foundry IQ, but rather you'll have your agent connected as one tool to Foundry IQ, as a second tool to Fabric IQ, as I did it here. But you have both options and you can kind of choose which one works for you. And there's also a question as to whether Fabric IQ uses Purview. I'm actually not sure whether Fabric IQ itself uses Purview, and that might be a good thing to cover on the Fabric IQ dedicated session. But the fact is that when you make these agent users, they are equally subject to Purview. I didn't really go into that, but there's a whole Purview settings for that and all that kind of stuff. And so Purview applies to Autopilot style users just as it does to any other user in your organization, and it applies to the same data sets as well. I mean, maybe we can go deeper into that portion of it, into the data protection portion of it in the Fabric IQ session. But on the surface, I'll say, yes, Purview applies to those things just as it applies to you as a user. And there's a question on licensing too. Will we be able to use Work IQ for custom agents without requiring an M365 Copilot license in the future? Well, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Aicha, now all of that stuff is rolled into that M365 Frontier license, the one that we looked at earlier. So you don't have to give it all the different licenses anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, there might be some additional changes coming in the future, but currently we need the M365 Copilot license to be able to utilize Work IQ. The Frontier license is required for Agent 365. But yeah, so we will see what comes next with the Work IQ. I'm not really sure if there will be any changes. This is something we can really ask in the Work IQ live stream we have in September.
Indeed. And it's maturing quickly. I mean, a lot of these things are changing very quickly. And so even from when Aicha and I started working with this stuff, it was only a few months ago, right? April, I think, something like that, to now. Yeah. Well, it's gotten a lot easier, for one thing, and the licensing has gotten cleaned up and those kinds of things. And so we are making continued improvements to make this easier and easier to work with.
Yeah, I think we can take one last question, which is about Purview. You just talked about, is Fabric IQ use Purview internally?
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, I don't really have a great answer for that one. So, I mean, I think that might be a better topic for the Fabric IQ deep dive that you have coming up in the near future.
Yeah, in fact, we have 2 sessions for Fabric IQ. One is talking about Fabric IQ all up, and the next session is going to be about Ontologies deep dive, where we talk specifically about Ontologies in Fabric. So you should definitely catch all of those if you're interested in Fabric more. And with that, we just have 1 minute left, so I'm going to close the session out. Thank you so much, Marco. It was an amazing session. And if you can share the demo that you have, I'm sure you have GitHub repo of that in the chat. That would be also really amazing if anyone wants to dig deeper into that. And yeah, thank you so much for joining in the session and speaking with me.
All right. Thank you, Aisha, for having me. See you next time.
Screen or in the chat. And we'll see you at the next one. Thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find our survey link on the screen or in the chat.